What is the point of a Porsche 911 in 2025? There are some really well-defined variants, the track-hungry GT3 and the comfy base Carrera. But what about a niche mid-spec variant like this 911 Carrera T? It could just be the perfect 911. Certainly for enthusiasts, the standard 6-speed manual suggests that might be the case. Today, we're going to interrogate that theory in a slightly different way. You're going to join me as we head out west of New South Wales to get under the 911 Carrera T's skin. It should be the perfect car for it, because even though it's a big day out on some nasty roads, a 911 is a car that should encourage you to find good, exciting roads, but not punish you for driving on bad ones. I'm sure we'll discover some highs, but I reckon we're also going to find some lows. And because we're 100% independent here at Chasing Cars and powered by Budget Direct, I'll be able to tell you all of those without fear. I'm John Law, this is Chasing Cars, let's get into it. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. The first problem might be fitting all of our film gear into the Carrera T. Apart from some mild contortionism needed to load things onto the parcel shelf, the 911 remains as practical as ever. It's one of its many strengths. Now I'm going to come to my first miss, I think, of the 992.2 generation, and that is a loss of sense of occasion when it comes to starting the car. There's no more twist to start, it's just a simple push-button start, which is easier to interact with, but just takes away some of that specialness. With the T, at least there is some specialness added back in with the open-pore walnut-topped shifter and the standard sports exhaust. I reckon it's time to get on the road. One of the great things about the 911 has always been visibility. I can see all four corners out of this car, and it's just so easy to maneuver and drive around in. A long travel clutch that means it's almost effortless driving this manual transmission around. I don't miss a PDK, and then we've got the nose lift, which is quite an expensive option, but when you're coming out of steep driveways onto busy Sydney roads, I think it might just be worth it to save damaging the GTS lip on this car. Today's route takes us out west, over the Blue Mountains to some of my favourite driving spots, including Cox's River Road, Jenolan Caves Road and more. But getting there, like everything in Sydney, requires schlepping down poorly surfaced motorways, which is what brings us to the first tiring aspect of the Carrera T. It's the road noise. It's the oldest 911 complaint in the book, and it's going to happen when you have 305 section rear tyres, a lot of weight over the back end, and in this 911T, less sound deadening than the normal Carrera. The stereo is also not super powerful and not super able to cover all that road noise. You also don't have adaptive cruise control. And that's pretty much the end of my list of complaints, because even though the ride is firm and sporty, it's beautifully damped. The car moves through the motions of its dampers and absorbs bumps excellently. Plus all the control weights are so well matched, and things like visibility are amazing in the 911. You've got so much glass around you. It is not an intimidating car to drive at all. Thought we should just address what exactly the Carrera T is in the range. It was a nameplate revived in 2017 after first appearing in the late 60s, and you might have guessed it stands for Touring. Currently, it sits between the base Carrera and the Carrera S, using the base car's 3-litre twin-turbo flat 6, pretty much unchanged. You could, I guess, call it the poor man's GT3 Touring, but ultimately, at $306,800 before on-road costs, I don't think a poor anyone is going to be able to afford this car. Still, what's different between this and a base Carrera? The cynic in me says you could probably just spec up the base Carrera with what this has. So a sports exhaust, sport chrono, and PASM adaptive dampers with a 10mm lower ride height. But there are some specific tweaks to the Carrera T under the skin. Those include a unique rear-wheel steering tune along with different anti-roll bars to give it more neutral steer, says Porsche, something we'll be able to test out very shortly. I should add that our particular vehicle is pretty heavily optioned, costing $343,000 or thereabouts before on-road costs. Those options include the Gentian Blue accent pack you see outside and in, Plus, you got to pay extra for things like Matrix LED headlights. Our car's also got 18-way adaptive sports seats, which cost nearly $6,000. If it was my money, I'd stick with the standard seats or perhaps go for the optional buckets. But you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Now we're on the stuff that the 911T was made for. You might say you'd have more fun at a track, but I actually think this car is perfect for a good twisty country road because you've got the 6-speed manual gearbox. It's got a lovely positive feel, light enough but also firm enough to feel like you have a real mechanical connection to the car. It adds a whole nother dimension to when you're just sort of cruising along like this in normal mode, where the adaptive dampers continue to absorb bumps beautifully and the steering is actually a little bit chattery. So rare in a car these days, especially with electric power assisted steering, but Porsche got it right way back in the 991 and hasn't gotten any worse since. You can still just about feel it moving around in your fingers. It's not as granular as a hydraulic rack, but it still gives plenty of good vibes, and the ratio is just beautiful. There's no dead spot on center and it is so natural. You can increase the weight by going up into the sport drive mode, and that brings me to the easiness of adjusting this car's vibes. You can do it all with physical buttons. We've got the drive mode dial here, super simple to tweak, but you've also got a damper button here if you want to quickly access sport mode for the dampers or vice versa when you're in sport mode, and you've got the standard sports exhaust, which I've just pressed now, and that wakes up this Carrera T's 3-litre twin-turbo flat six, which is the same as you find in the base Carrera, but because you've got less sound deadening and that exhaust as standard, it just feels a bit more special, a bit more vocal, and it encourages you to start driving a little bit more quickly. At which point, you delight even more in the steering's responses, and you get to feel how progressive and confidence-inspiring the brake pedal is. You can shift gears smoothly and gently, or you can bang home the gears if you want. And when you get to a good series of corners, as we're about to in a minute, you can shift down, blip the throttle. There is an auto blip function which works really well, but equally, the setup of the pedals in this car is so good for heel and toe, it's almost more natural to do that than wait for the auto blip to kick in my book. I should add how excellent the response is from the throttle pedal when you want to blip, even in normal mode, which I've found to be my favorite mode, normal. It gives a little bit more roll and a little bit more breathability to the chassis on the rather nasty roads we're driving on today. And you can feel the inherent balance. There's still that rear engine feel. If you get it wrong and get on the gas too early, it will lift up the front end just that little bit to remind you that this is indeed a 911, not a Cayman. You have to have your wits about you. But when you do, and you get the balance right, it fires you out of a corner. It's such an addictive feeling the wide rear tires just hook up and off you go. ESC systems, also fabulous. And you get to revel in that lovely noise. No, it's not quite a 911 GT3, but when you're saving about 200 grand and change, I think I'd be pretty happy with this thing. It's a funny thing where a circa $350,000 car doesn't feel overly special inside on first impressions. Things like this graining up on the dash top here and on the door tops feels kind of like mid to up spec BMW grade. It doesn't feel super high quality, and it's the same thing with the headliner. You know, you might expect something like a suede or up spec material in here. I think what you're paying for in Porsche is the ability firstly to customize that expensively, but also a certain amount of ergonomic excellence that not many other cars hit, certainly in this segment. I mean, you look at a Lotus or something like a McLaren or a Corvette, and you don't get the same level of thoughtfulness inside the cabin. Switches up here, hard switches for controlling drive mode settings. You get a volume knob, you get external, easy to use climate control buttons. You get the option of having a cup holder in the center here or a square box that's perfect for the key. You get a center console bin that's just the perfect size for a smartphone, no bigger. And you get a couple of even carpeted pockets in the door cards. Plus, all of the controls on the steering wheel fall so easily to hand, so tactile, so easy to use, and then even the technology is satisfying. Apple CarPlay wirelessly has worked brilliantly over this test, and Porsche's own software looks really crisp and nice. And finally I've got to come to the digital dials and the digital driver's display. I've been finding that having the classic 5-dial setup is really nice, but if you want, you can simply scroll down on the wheel for customizable 3 dials, and you can even show a full map. That's not something you get in every car at this price, and although you do get that in things like Audis, it's just great that even though this high-end sports car is special and unique, it still gets the basic stuff right. Such is the way when you road test cars that you peel back layers of them as you get more intimate with the driving experience, and that is true of the Carrera T. And I think I found 2 small issues with this vehicle, but they really are nitpicks. The first is the engine. I was in the GTS, the T hybrid last week, and that car was animalistically fast. The base Carrera engine is plenty quick, but at 290 kilowatts, it's not going to rip your face off. And then there's the fact that you don't get a proper electronically controlled limited slip differential in the Carrera T, which means you don't get the same shove and the same drive out of corners. And while you rarely notice this on the road, I think if you are trying to access the limits of grip on a track, you might find this a little bit annoying. You do get it on the $40,000 more expensive Carrera S, so I guess if that's a big deal, then you can step up to that car. But I keep coming back to it. When you start getting stuck into the Carrera T, it does deliver, and it does deliver a lot. So after a pretty big day out, covering over 500 Ks, filming, driving, what do we think of the 911? Does it still deserve to exist, and does the Carrera T make sense? Look, at its price here, you could just get a Carrera S, which is faster and a bit more focused with that rear diff. But equally, the 911T carves out this beautiful niche. It's so engaging that 6-speed manual adds another dimension to the driving experience. So it's not going to be for everyone, but for me, I do genuinely think this is the best 911 you can buy without going to a GT product. It's so satisfying. It skips like a stone across a calm body of water through corners and over bumps, and it is just so rewarding. And yet, when it comes to cruising back home, it's no big deal. Yes, it's a little bit loud, but the seats are comfortable and the ride is so refined, so good. I guess that comes as no surprise though, because this recipe has been around for more than 60 years. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section down below. Hit subscribe to Chasing Cars if you haven't done so already, and as always, thank you very much for watching.